So, today, Sceptical Lefties episode 6, and we are doing this because through social distancing rules. We are doing this via Skype, which, well, I hope you can hear us clearly enough.
Yeah.
And we're gonna.
I can't see Fred, but I do have Willy Wonka saying "Oh really" at me right now. So
There's a surprise, given that it's our channel avatar.
yeah,
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you don't want to see me anyway. It's bad enough in person, never mind on a screen.
yeah. As the old joke goes, Fred, you've got a radio face.
A radio face, absolutely. But anyway, so episode 6 is all about the new glorious Labour leader, the Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer, or the subtitle, "Please, plebs, love me."
Yeah. Keir Starmer, the most greatest, most brilliant, most super duper, most amazing, most incredible leader of the opposition the Labour Party's ever had. I mean, he's practically a combination of Cicero, Clement Attlee, Winston Churchill, and Abraham Lincoln rolled into one. His performance
And a Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you probably have inferred by that, very heavy sarcasm. Not particular fans, but then again, we are lefties, so why would we be? But however, it's actually quite good when you think about it, because now I can say to you all, happy 2013, everybody. Because here we are going, we'll be going into the next election with a load of Tory-like policies, and probably get creamed even worse than in 2019. I can't fucking wait.
I agree. I mean, the first thing to say about Keir Starmer's leadership is that it never, since the leadership election began way back in December, I imagine it began, and it's just, I've said it to you before, and I'll say it again, it has never ceased to amaze me, the levels of wish fulfillment that this new Labour leader has elicited, and his shadow cabinet has elicited. But if you, just speaking to some of my friends in the party and reading what people are writing in the respectable broadsheets and the magazines, you would have thought that this was the second coming of the risen Christ or something. But it doesn't look to me like Starmer has any hope of leading the Labour Party back to government. None whatsoever. And the idea that we're going to get back to government by having Ed Miliband Mark II with basically all of the same problems that Ed Miliband had, but without with a hacked off party membership and no money. It's just bonkers. It's madness.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of suspect that at least Keir Starmer will be able to eat a bacon sandwich without looking like a complete spanner.
Yeah, but this eating thing in public has become like, it's something that happens to at every general election. I mean,
it happens to every politician. I mean, if you remember, there was a great picture of Barack Obama drinking a pint of Guinness.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that actually he kind of looks like one. Yeah, and yes, I did go there. Not going to apologise.
Because he's black and Irish.
I guess so. I was just thinking because of the hair, quite frankly. But yeah. Nelson Mandela did as well, and that was done on national. Rory Bremner did a thing about that on national television, and no one complained. So.
Okay, fair enough.
If Rory Bremner can get away with it, that's fine.
Oh, okay, all right. That makes me feel better then. Okay.
Yeah, it was on Mock the Week. You should watch it. I was absolutely.
But I also says at some point Keir Starmer is going to eat something in public, and it will be shown on every news channel. It'll be in every newspaper.
It'll be the make or break of him, realistically, won't it? It'll be like, does this guy, did he use the right fork or something silly like that? Oh my God, that's actually a grape fork. What an amateur.
Yeah. No, generally. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, because let's face it, no one's face looks good in repose when they're shoving a bacon sandwich into their mouth or anything like that.
No, because eating a bacon sandwich is a very primal thing. It's something that everyone just, all social graces go out the window, and it's like, no, I'm going to bury my face in this.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, the whole
presumably Ed Miliband's grimace was because some dickhead had put ketchup on instead of brown sauce.
Yeah.
There's a controversial topic. Which sauce to put on a bacon butty?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll get to Ed Miliband in a minute because he's now back in the shadow cabinet, don't you know?
Absolutely is. Yes, I can't remember which one. Is it education? No, that's Michael on Bailey, isn't it?
He's business secretary.
Business secretary. Yes, yeah. Which it makes sense for a pretend Tory to be in business, just simply because of the fact that Tory's going to look after Tories.
Yeah, I mean it's worth reflecting on. I mean, the best thing you can say about that appointment is it does play to Ed Miliband's strengths. Like, I know he is very, very good on the green issues, and his podcast has been putting forward some interesting ideas with creating a more egalitarian economy, like UBI, shorter working week, and things. So the best thing,
mansion tax, even.
Yeah. But the best thing to say about that is it plays to Ed's strengths. But it is worth reflecting a little bit on the Ed Miliband years because they're very instructive in light of Starmer, and they might actually offer some instruction of how a Keir Starmer leadership will ultimately pan out. But I want to talk about this eating food bit just for a moment because it is indicative of a real dilemma for politicians. Obviously, if you eat something in public and you look ridiculous doing it, as everyone does,
yes,
people will laugh at you like Ed Miliband. But on the other hand, if you try and get around that and try not to look foolish eating something in public, you go into something absolutely ghastly. Like, do you remember when David Cameron and Barack Obama had that barbecue in Number 10, and David Cameron was eating a hot dog with these little like plastic knife and fork you get in a fish and chip shop?
Oh, good heavens!
Who the fuck eats a hot dog like that? No one. But what he was trying to do, he was trying to avoid the awkward moment of shoving it in his gob and having it photographed.
Yes.
For the whole world to laugh at. Like, if that is the extent to which politicians are so image conscious, how on earth can you have any policy-driven politics when that is the level of image consciousness that they are under?
Yeah, so, I mean, let's not forget the infamous Neil Kinnock was undone by a picture in the Sun of and the accompanying footage of him falling over trying to outrun the waves on the beach.
Yeah.
That is the thing that really killed Neil Kinnock, as far as the public perception of him went. Once that happened, it did not matter policy at this point, because it's like, oh look, here's a plonker who can't stay stood up.
And he does that strange little. Have you seen? I take it you've seen the video, haven't you?
Of course. I mean, Neil Kinnock is actually a distant cousin of mine. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, very distant. It's not something I generally like to admit, actually, but yeah, it is actually true. Yeah.
And but what I've always found very curious about that video is after he's fallen on his arse, he gets up and makes that strange hand gesture.
Yes.
I don't even know. I still scratch my head and think, what did he mean by that? I think what he meant is, I've just done something really stupid, and And
I acknowledge the fact.
Yeah. But
realistically, that's probably the worst thing he could have done. I think he probably would have garnered a lot more public sympathy if he'd have feigned some sort of injury, like a sprained ankle or something. Because as we know now, you can be entirely incompetent and ill-prepared and a square peg in a round hole, and other analogies as well. as long as you get sick, and Boris has taught us this. And I have to say, and I have a friend, American friend, who messaged me on the day that the news broke of Boris supposedly contracting COVID-19, and straight away just went, "Nah, don't buy it, man. Do not buy that story. Fuck off." And then the more you sort of look at it, the more I kind of question it, because let's face it, it is not beyond him.
Oh, well, the one thing we know about Boris Johnson, that he's a serial liar. He's a pathological liar.
I mean, Tory's gonna Tory. It's as simple as that.
Well, Boris takes lying and disinformation to a
Olympic level.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what went on. I mean, I'm for the moment, I'm willing to take it at face value that he probably did contract some kind of.
He may well have done. The thing I object to, though, is that, and I do think this is absolutely ridiculous, and no one else has seemed to have picked up on this, that he was in Downing Street and he contracts COVID-19. He goes into hospital, assuming that this is all genuine. He gets great treatment. He recovers, and then he goes to Chequers in some sort of convalescence, which would mean that he risks potentially infecting not only the staff who work for him in Downing Street, but also the staff now at Chequers.
Mm-hmm.
And, no one seems to have picked up on this, and it's absolutely fucking astounding.
Yeah, well, the only thing I have read, and I'll try and find it now, the only thing I've read which made me think that he might have spread it is because a journalist was trying to find out from a doctor exactly what would, or they were trying to interview someone who'd been on the same ward as Boris Johnson. Apparently there were sort of inconsistencies between the two accounts.
Yes, I think I remember hearing this, actually.
Yeah, I can't remember where I read it, but I definitely read it. Someone was trying to find out what being on that ward was like from someone who had actually been in the same position.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, their account they gave was different from Boris Johnson's or the government's account. Which, if there are two differing accounts of on that ward, it would probably imply we were being lied to. But
yeah, I mean, it is one of those. I mean, it is not beyond the realms of reality that he could well have lied, because but then again also it's kind of not outside of the realms of what if it is true and the idea was that he would either recover and be a hero or die and be a martyr.
Yeah,
either way, realistically, he has somehow come off very well out of it in the public eye.
It would be an extraordinarily Machiavellian thing to do, considering how shit his leadership has been throughout the whole crisis. And maybe this is another.
I think you mean good in inverted commas there.
Sorry?
When you said good his leadership is, I assume you meant in inverted commas there.
Is how shit. I mean, the government's handling of the crisis has been dreadful, but
yes,
it just doesn't seem to go down in the polls. And I just can't understand it. I mean,
I think we actually can understand it, because the alternative is the new leader of the opposition, and I think we should absolutely get back to that. We know one of our usual tangents, so that brings us quite neatly, actually maybe a little clumsily, but it does bring us on to the leader of the opposition. Now, for those who don't know a lot about Keir Starmer, which would be actually probably quite a lot of people, he is actually a very accomplished lawyer. He is a Queen's Counsel, and he's been at the bar for quite a number of years now, and he was head of public prosecutions. until he sort of did he do that at the same time he was a member of Parliament? He probably did.
No, he didn't. He was
Oh, he did. Okay.
Director of Public Prosecutions for about 8 years or so, and then he became a Labour MP in 2015. So he's not been an MP for that long, really, only about 5 years.
No, but then again, as a lawyer, someone who is used to standing his ground in a courtroom and convincing people that black is white, because apparently as well he preferred to defend rather than to prosecute, from what I've read. Albeit I don't, I won't say that I've read extensively on the man, but looking through various sort of cliff notes of him, when you look at his sort of, when people sort of list his general political views, it does sound quite favourable to us mental lefties. He believes in fully funding the NHS. He believes in well, this is all apparently. I mean, just what I've read. He supposedly believes in ownership of utilities and services, public ownership of utilities and services, and things like that. And it does seem that on paper he looks reasonable.
Yeah, but I think, as I said to you, I think on before, Fred, my hypothesis is there's been a very large amount of cherry picking through Keir Starmer's CV.
I'm very certain of it. And when I looked as well, people were saying about, well, he could potentially reconnect with the electorate. It's certainly the so-called red wall that we so disastrously lost in 2019.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. But first of all, I want to talk about Starmer's record as a lawyer, because I've noticed this is something which just comes up again and again and again. And speaking to friends in the party and reading the media, it's something which just does just come up and up and up.
I know what you're going to say here.
People are obsessed with Keir Starmer's record, and Keir Starmer's been very adroit at presenting himself as this crusading human rights barrister, kind of like a bit like Michael Mansfield, who's a genuinely radical lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, Keir does specialise in human rights law, doesn't he? He likes those cases.
Yeah, but if you look at his record as head of this Crown Prosecution Service, and there's some very, very big question marks over it. Not least for the fact that he chose not to bring legal action against the policeman who shot Charles in 2005, which that is something which I think is very concerning, given how much our political imaginations are still shaped by the Iraq War and that kind of Cold War type of atmosphere in politics
I think, and not just the Iraq War, but also, things much more domestic, such as you say, Jean-Charles de Menezes. There was Mark Duggan when he was shot, that kicked off the Tottenham riots.
Yeah,
and things of that sort. And then, and I must definitely go on record here and say that this is absolutely allegedly. I cannot, at the moment, find anything to say that he was directly responsible for this decision. But the one thing that keeps coming back and that I see under every single post on his Twitter feed and on his Facebook feed is that he allegedly chose not to pursue the legal case against Jimmy Savile whilst he was still alive.
Yes, and when I read that for the first time, I thought, oh no, because
you can call Jeremy, and people have done whatever you like, but unfortunately there's just no fucking evidence of it. Especially like the terrorism shit. But something like that, an allegation that you, and I mean, if you ask anybody what is probably the most emotive form of crime, like the one that elicits the sort of guttural revulsion in people, and it is child sex offences.
Yeah, and particularly, I mean, apart from the kind of horror at Jimmy Savile's crime, it's a double blow because it's put Starmer in the worst possible light for getting back those working class voters in the red wall. Because
if it's true,
is that because the thing about the Jimmy Savile cover-up is that it was an establishment cover-up. Every organ of the establishment played its part in remaining silent for Jimmy Savile's crimes. Police, politicians, broadcasters, journalists, with the exception of one or two courageous journalists who built dossiers of Savile's crimes, and one of them has authored a book about Savile.
And you'd also think that even someone, regardless of what you think of any other issue to do with her, you'd have thought Maggie would have taken a look, because she would have known. There's no way she couldn't have known. As the Prime Minister, nothing. You can obviously lie and say that you didn't know, but realistically, there's no way you couldn't have known.
Yeah, exactly.
And she was pictured with Jimmy on many occasions, and it was I wouldn't mind betting it was probably her that recommended him for his knighthood. Again, I don't know that for certain, but it would have been about the right time.
Yeah. You're exactly right, Fred, and it's been known for a long time that there were at least 2 sex offenders in Margaret Thatcher's cabinet.
Yes.
And at least 2. But anyway, as I was saying, the fact that the Jimmy Savile cover-up was such a revolting establishment crime is it puts Keir Starmer in exactly the wrong place to connect with an electorate who hate establishment politicians and whose contempt for the establishment is at an all-time high, because it looks like Starmer is a part of this network of establishment institutions and establishment figures.
Well, yes, he couldn't be any more establishment if unless he was a prince. Realistically,
yeah, exactly.
He is the epitome of the establishment. A knight of the realm. A knight of the realm just cannot. There is no way that he can realistically connect with the working man. And I looked up. Because that's the kind of thing that people said, he can reconnect with the working man. And you look at it, and he was born in Suffolk, which isn't exactly a poor area of London, and then grew up in a small market town of Oxted in Surrey, and that's Oxted, not Oxford, obviously, because it's in the wrong county for a start. And I've looked up pictures of Oxted in the town centre. And all the buildings are lovely, half timbered, sort of Tudor style, and it looks bloody lovely. And yeah, I mean, come on. I grew up in a dead end fishing town that got absolutely cornholed by the Cod War in '74, and it's been going downhill ever since. I know what it's like to come from trash.
Yeah, and it's not as if. And also, the other thing I would say is, let's just play devil's advocate and say that Starmer is who he says he is, and he came from a humble family, bright lad, went to grammar school, whatever. Starmer's mid-50s now? His childhood home is a long, long way away. He's been practicing barrister for a very long time.
Yeah, he's very much, regardless of whether he did or did not sort of suffer in that sort of inverted commas kind of way, he's a very long way removed from that by now.
I mean, whatever humble origins he did have, he's been a metropolitan, highly remunerated barrister for a long, long time. And really,
not short of a bob or two, is he?
Yeah, I mean, really. And when you've had a career that long and you've lived to that age, is it really relevant what your childhood was like anymore? I don't think so.
I don't either.
And so I don't think that's going to catch a wind of the people. And
Yeah.
as this, there's some evidence to suggest that the Savile stain on Starmer's record has cut through with people. I know it's being shared on social media and on WhatsApp and Twitter, and I know it's getting through to people. But again, this is the problem with this cherry-picked CV he presented to Labour Party members, because he was trying to present himself as this kind of heroic lawyer, and there were these big. It wasn't presenting the full picture, and I think a lot of people in the Labour Party just got carried away, and they were not.
It's easy to get carried away with someone who is sort of bright and shiny, and of course the obvious example there is Tony Blair.
Yeah.
He was bright and shiny, had a lovely beaming smile, and everyone was like, "Damn, this guy is fresh," you know, rather than the stuffy old politicians like Major and Michael Foot and John Smith, God rest his soul, and God rest obviously Michael Foot's soul as well. But yeah, this kind of a new face in politics is actually worth a hell of a lot more than people give it credit for, I think. And Keir Starmer is a new face in the grand scheme of things. As you say, he's not been in Parliament for long. He's sort of he's seen as the sort of, I suppose you could say, maybe some kind of weird sort of cool young stepdad, you know, kind of figure certainly compared to Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost portraying himself as everyone's favourite brother-in-law. You know, bright, you know, aspirational, and all of that. But as if, you know, those things like his record, his CV, his background, they're not going to be assets to him. Certainly not in the long term. No. And I do believe this Savile thing will haunt him. It's already haunting him, and I don't think he's really got a good answer for why he didn't choose to prosecute if he was ultimately responsible for making that decision. And we have so all of those things are going to count against him when it comes to getting back the voters we need to get back to win the next.
These are, you know, that is a major question that needs a definitive answer, whether it be in the positive or the negative. But if it, you know, if he comes out on live TV, not in that way, but if he says, you know, that in fact it was not myself that took that decision, well, in that case, we will need to know who was.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just enough to deny. You have to at least provide an alternative and preferably substantiating evidence to support it. So, you know, very, very big elephant in the room with that.
You have on to the fact that forget about winning the next election, Starmer's lost us one election already.
Pretty much, yeah.
No. And
this is exemplified by the fact that if you speak to pretty much any Tory right now, they are overjoyed that Keir Starmer is Labour leader, because they know full well exactly what that means, i.e., oh well, that's us in power for the next, well, ad infinitum.
Yes, exactly. I don't think despite what the Tory party may say in public, like George Osborne's made some noises saying Keir Starmer will bring credibility back to the opposition. Boris Johnson's invited him to Cobra meetings and government briefings. Forget what Boris Johnson and George Osborne say in public. Behind the scenes, the Tory party isn't scared one bit by a Starmer leadership, because they know he's the architect of our disastrous Brexit policy.
Yes.
You know,
and this is what people need to understand. If you're going to win back the red wall, then you don't want somebody who deliberately went against their wishes.
Yeah. I mean, didn't go against their wishes, just stuck two fingers up to them.
Well, yeah, that as well. I mean, I was being a bit more polite, but yeah, I mean, which is a rare thing for me, as you know. But yeah, to be fair, he did. He did. You know, he stuck two fingers up and said, you know, fuck what you want. You're just a pleb. I know better.
Yeah. And and it was an ultimate disaster. And as I've said to everyone, there are two things which were deplorable about Starmer's time as our shadow Brexit secretary. Well, the first one was the fact that he along with a small group of people in the shadow cabinet in the party, but he was like the main figurehead of this small movement who wanted to push us towards basically, if not stopping Brexit altogether, at least a second referendum or a people's vote. And that first was deplorable because elections are not won in places like York, Cambridge, Hackney, Islington,
No.
Lincoln, Norwich, Bath. They're not won in these places. They're won in Tory Labour marginals like Nuneaton, Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Hartlepool, Stoke.
And the fact that, and obviously you mentioned Grimsby Cleethorpes there, which obviously my home territory, and the fact that both of those, within a decade of each other, can flip to Tory.
Yeah.
I can kind of understand Cleethorpes. It's a seaside town, so you could say it's certainly a little bit more elitist than Grimsby, but Grimsby, their outgoing Labour MP was Melanie On, and she was very much of the Remain camp, and Grimsby was overwhelmingly Leave voting, just simply because all the fishermen thought they were going to get their fucking boats back.
Let's be honest. I mean, Melanie On, I know what you're saying, Fred, and I agree with you, but also Melanie On is like a lot of MPs in those seats. She ultimately, aside from Brexit, I mean, Brexit, I agree with you, but Melanie On also has to carry the can as well, because she, in my view, I just didn't think she was very good, No,
she wasn't. She was fucking incompetent. And you ask anybody, any resident of Grimsby, whether they be Labour or Conservative voters or other, she was absolutely just a complete vacuum of a person. Did not do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching her on TV once, and I just thought she was just shit.
Yeah. But she was an opportunist. She thought, oh well, here's a fucking cushy paycheck.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, once people take a set against you, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And, there was no way she would have won a second term.
No, I mean, and also, but going back to Starmer is like, aside from the fact that his idea of pushing the party towards adopting a 100% Remain ultra position, despite the fact that the marginals we need to win to form a government are traditionally Labour voting Leave constituencies. What Keir Starmer did is doubly deplorable by the fact that he did it in front of the entire world. Yeah. So if you remember, I think it was 2017 actually, when so the policy up until that point had gone through many different permutations, but they all had something in common, which was there was an unspoken commonality between all of them, which was that it would be a deal between mostly northern Leave voters who traditionally vote Labour and young urban metropolitan Remainers, which is that they would go for something which is out for a Brexit, which would leave the country outside of the European Union, but would be close enough to Europe that Remainers could be satisfied. And that was what led to partly to the great victory. Well, the great swing to Labour in 2017 is because we had something for everyone.
Yeah, and of course, because we could sort of appeal to both sides, in as much as at that point we were still going ahead with it with Leave, but we were it was the Remain camp was sort of like a sort of a steadying hand, if you like, rather than to sort of keep us from maybe not going just too balls deep with it. Whereas in in the ranks of the Tories at the time, you had two very hard factions either way. The Labour Party doesn't really contain an equivalent of the European Research Group, the ERG, of which Jacob Rees-Mogg is the sort of poster boy in the Tory party. And so in the Tory party, you've got the ERG, who are the sort of ultra hard Brexiteers. No deal. Sorry, it's 2 fingers up, and just cut ourselves off from Europe and float away, probably into the arms of American businessmen.
Yeah. So Starmer goes off in front of the at party conference and says, "We're not ruling out a second referendum, and
it doesn't sound like that."
And now we're taking Remain off the table, and it was cheered to the rafters. And it was the fact that it was. I remember watching that, and I was appalled by it because it was so public. And from that point on, we just lost control. And the 2 people in the shadow cabinet that correctly predicted what a disaster this policy would. How disastrous this policy would be were Ian Lavery and John Trickett, who authored a report, and I've been talking about this, I think, in our previous episodes, called Northern Discomfort, which was their report, which talked about the decline of our working class support and how vulnerable we were in those Northern Leave constituencies, and that report was suppressed at the time, but now it's been published, and if you read it, it correctly predicts the number of seats that would swing from Labour to the Tories.
Oh, what the hell? What was that?
1 second, I've just got a phone call. Can you stop? Hang on a second.
Oh dear.
Hang on.
For that little interlude, there's some technical difficulties we're having.
So we were talking about Northern Discomfort. Ian Lavery and John Trickett correctly predicted the number of seats which would swing from the Tories to Labour to within a margin of 2 seats.
Yes. Yes, they absolutely did. And how about that?
So this election winning genius, this troll whisperer, Keir Starmer, just lost us an election by a wide margin. And my fear is that a lot of Labour voters have basically got it into their heads that the reason we lost is that we didn't oppose Brexit enough from the very start, which is just,
that's ludicrous. That's ludicrous. I mean, the thing is, regardless of what you think about Brexit, whether you're in favour of it or not, unfortunately, you have to deal with it. You have to accept it. I really am fucked off the fact we've got a Tory government, but I got to suck it up and get on with my life.
Yeah.
I am resigned to the fate of this country now. It's not my fault. I did the right thing. And I know you did as well. A lot of us did the right thing, but far too many, of course, didn't. And they're fucking seeing it now, aren't they?
Yeah. And, my real fear is that, here's the thing about politics is, this country is a mosaic of voters, right? And so you need a broad offer. And I don't see how any government can any party can form a government, realistically form a government, given how diverse the different views are in the UK, not just on Brexit, but on all sorts of things, without having a broad offer. I mean, you're not going to win a election just by getting middle-class, metropolitan, cosmopolitan, liberal, socially liberal Remain voters in York, for example. You're just not going to win an election on that basis. You've got to have something for everyone. And, if you're going to form a national government, which to represent the nation as a whole, you've got to have an offer for everyone. And
you've got to represent the concerns of all sides, whether it be just the basic binary of Leave or Remain. Obviously, the Remain concerns will be, well, what about our existing trade deals? What about the flow of goods, etc. And that's obviously just the two major concerns. But then there's other things like, what about green issues? What about business issues? What about, the list goes on, obviously.
Yeah.
And we instead chose to plow in with this kind of ridiculous, very narrow viewed approach with just sending one party. And I would have been of this exact same opinion had it been a Labour government. I just want to point that out. I think that it should have been a national government, a national unity government, as opposed to just simply whomever won in the usual style. And I advocated that from the very start. It should have been like that instead of what we currently had, or what we have.
I'm not sure about that, but what I would say is there was a chance where a Tory Brexit could have been avoided if Johnson's Liberal Democrats would agree to support a national government, a minority government led by Jeremy Corbyn, but they didn't do that.
No.
And the fucking idiots have got a Tory government ramming through any kind of Brexit they want.
Well, considering that the vast majority of the Liberal Democrats is seemingly now made up by ex-Tories, it's hardly surprising.
Yeah, I mean.
But anyway, if we sort of move on from Brexit just now,
just before
because you go on. Then,
can you name the leader of the Liberal Democrats? Can you?
Sorry, we'll say again. Sorry.
Can you name the leader of the Liberal Democrats?
Right now, no, I couldn't.
No, neither can I.
No, I don't think probably they can either.
No. Anyway, so we.
As long as there's no sort of controversy in how to say their name, like Mingus Campbell.
Yeah. Right.
And it is actually Mingus, for anyone who's wondering, not Ming. But anyway, that's a separate issue. The thing with so we get on to Keir Starmer and his, albeit short so far at the time of writing, tenure as Labour leader. Pretty much the first thing he does it is not sort of address the COVID-19 problem, the crisis. It's not to try and reassure former obviously Jeremy Corbyn supporters and all of that side of the party. No, his first job is to tackle the non-existent anti-Semitism by talking of all bloody people, the so-called Board of Deputies, who are a right-wing organisation, who are not affiliated with the Labour Party in any way, shape or form.
An unelected right-wing organisation, and they only represent about 30% of Jewish people in Britain. Yeah,
this wasn't done with the this was done by not listening to, for example, an affiliated group such as Jewish Voice for Labour, etc., or the Jewish Labour Movement.
Yeah.
It's done with this completely separate organisation who share none of our values.
No.
As certainly as a ostensibly socialist party.
Yeah.
And he like all the, I mean, yes, of course, Rebecca Long Bailey also sort of signed up to those 10 pledges that the deputies put out. But I think
we should have an honourable mention at this point for Richard Bergen, who was, I think, the only candidate who didn't agree to the 10 pledges.
Yeah,
Thank
you, Richard.
Yeah, so it showed great courage and
but
then saying no, I just won't sign them, and But
that doesn't mean to say that that certainly did not mean to say that that Richard is in favour of anti-Semitism or is an anti-Semite. He isn't, of course. But it just goes to prove that of all those candidates for leader and deputy leader, Richard Bergen was the one who said, "No, I am taking a stand on this." And I'm not going to be dictated to by someone by a bunch of people who don't even share our values.
Yeah, I mean, if those 10 pledges became a part of the Labour Party rules, there would be no place for Palestinian solidarity at all in the party, because, you know, it just wouldn't be possible to have freedom of speech in the party if those 10 pledges were adopted.
Exactly, and this is the one thing that that really hacks me off, is making people, any group of people, into a protected species, because then they can pretty much do what they want, and there is no voice to say, hang on, you're doing X and I think that is wrong.
Yeah.
And that this, of course, you know, some will obviously scream the word Zionist, and others will scream, you know, anti-Semitism. But realistically, you know, the thing to point out here is being anti-Israel does not, categorically not, make one anti-Jewish.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
You know, being anti-Nazi does not make one anti-German. Being, you know, being anti-fucking communist does not make one anti-Russian.
Yeah, I mean, if criticising Israel makes you anti-Semitic, then probably Archbishop Desmond Tutu is an anti-Semite, or Jimmy Carter is an anti-Semite. You know, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I mean, these. I mean, you don't get this so much from the Board of Deputies, but certainly the people on the hard right of that, of those kind of supporters of the State of Israel, they've called Archbishop Desmond Tutu an anti-Semite. You know, so they will basically accuse anyone who remotely criticises Israel in any way. Being anti.
This appears to be the new form of, you know, they used to use a blanket term of just general racism for any, you know, anyone who disagrees with anyone is automatically a racist, regardless of why they disagree. It's, you know, that nuance is never taken into account. It's just death racist, and that's it.
And
you know? And therefore your argument is invalid because I say so. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's and the worst thing is Starmer has actually teed up mass expulsions from the party. Now, looking beyond the immediate injustice of expelling people who, you know, are proud of this party's past as an anti-racist party, and we've got no reason to apologise for that for, and we're certainly not going to go grovelling to the Board of Deputies. I mean,
fuck them. Regardless of any other issue. Fuck the Board of Deputies.
Yeah, fuck the Board of Deputies.
Yeah, just for being shitty people, not because of their race or religion or whatever you want to call it, just because they are twats.
Yeah, they're cunts. Anyway, so but the mass expulsions thing, it's bad politics on a practical level, because looking at it purely from a practical point of view, who is, if you want to win back those Tory seats we lost at the last election, who is actually going to go and do the door knocking?
Yes, because it turns out that Keir Starmer hated selling himself to the Labour membership, which is good because, quite frankly, Keir, I wasn't fucking buying it.
No. And, you know, well, he had problems selling himself because it wasn't he was selling a kind of politics which he doesn't believe in.
Yeah.
And, you know, who on earth is going to win back these marginal constituencies if not activists? And
but then again, I can't necessarily say that, you know, you can't obviously guarantee that Rebecca Long-Bailey would have done it, or any of the other front runners, because unfortunately, without Ian Lavery running, there was nobody that really that had the proven track record.
Yeah, I mean, Ian Lavery is the kind of great lost candidate at the leadership election. I think he would have beaten Starmer. Paradoxically.
I think he would have done, and you know, and people might say, well, you know, oh, it's just the same. You know, no one wants Jeremy Corbyn politics. Well, that's bollocks, because overwhelmingly we do in the party, because we voted for it overwhelmingly twice.
Yeah,
and the second occasion more overwhelmingly.
Yeah. A lot of people have just kind of got carried away with the just the kind of utter the sheer levels of hysteria elicited by the media against Corbyn. I think that and Brexit have changed people's minds, and it's just it has been hysterical. But
Yeah.
if the expulsions happen, it's going to be disastrous in the long term, because when it becomes apparent that Keir Starmer is going to struggle if we get to say autumn 2023 and there's an election in spring 2024, it'll get to autumn 2023. It will dawn on Keir Starmer and his team that they're not going to win the next election, and they're going to have to put the feelers out to people who, frankly, they're going to need to knock on doors, and they're going to say, come on, knock on doors for us, and everyone's just going to fuck off. We've just abused us for 5 years. And this is not the politics of the 1990s. And aside from the fact that the party's going to lose loads of revenue in the fact that people won't be paying their direct debits anymore.
Yes, and even I've seen some people going so far as to attempt, I don't know if they've succeeded, but attempt to demand the return of all their subs as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that's somehow going to work, but do you know what? If it does, that's hilarious.
But it shows you how out of touch Starmer is. Like, this is not the politics of the 70s, 80s, and 90s anymore. People as a whole, my feeling is people don't have that level of institutional loyalty anymore. So, you know, if you abuse people consistently over years, they're not going to come out and support you in an election, even in opposition, even with the Tory government doing dreadful things to the NHS, to universal credit, to black and ethnic minority people. People are still not going to come out and automatically campaign for the Labour Party anymore.
No.
Fuck off! I'm not getting my train and going to fucking, any Pudsey to vote for a shit candidate. And shall we say, the candidate at the last election in Pudsey was great. Her name was Jane Aitchison.
Mm.
So, working class Geordie woman, president of Leeds Trade Union, TUC, fantastic woman.
Let's hope she has another go.
Yeah, really, really brilliant candidate. I would have loved to see Richard and Jane together as Leeds MPs, and I know she backed Richard in the deputy leadership election. So, yeah, great candidate. It's a shame she didn't get there. I've met her actually. So she's great. But I'm not going to get on a train and go for some PPE lanyard tosser who's going to privatise everything in sight in government and bomb several countries and expel people on non-existent anti-Semitism charges. And
Yes, I was quite amused at a tweet you sent to Lord Adonis earlier on today, saying Lord Adonis tweeted about what was it? Tony Blair would have been a fantastic person to have had in this current crisis.
Yeah.
And you put something to the effect of COVID-19 isn't a PFI and you can't bomb it.
Yeah.
That was fucking first level trolling. I love it.
But again, it is. That's exactly true. And aside from the fact, and we haven't even got to the fact that mass expulsions are just unjust on themselves.
Yeah.
And
they're on the horizon from what I can see. I hope not.
I'm contemplating whether to leave because I've got a feeling I'm going to be in the first in the queue to be expelled. So I'm gonna watch very carefully how it unfolds because
it's interesting times. I think the both of us will probably end up getting expelled because neither of us are particularly good at holding our peace. But quite frankly, I don't like the idea of going before you're pushed. I much prefer to go down in flames.
Well, yeah, a part of me wants to do that because let's face it, if we're expelled, it'll probably be a badge of honour from
an ASBO.
Yeah. They're basically putting the membership on political ASBOs.
Yeah. And you know what? I would love it. I have on my guitar, typical lefty. I'm a folky, and I have a few little small badges on my guitar strap, a Jeremy Corbyn one, which I'll probably have to change now. I probably won't actually, but I have a Je suis Charlie one as well after the Charlie Hebdo attacks, and I have an original 1960s CND badge.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah, and I will probably end up, commissioning one to be made. I got ejected from the Labour Party.
Yeah,
Something like that, for being right,
Well, that stuff makes me quite reflective about getting expelled. I would prefer to leave of my own accord if I have to leave in any form. But even if we are expelled, at least we're not going to be tarnished by the utter disaster that Keir Starmer is going to lead to us. If
yes. However, if I may as well, pose the idea that it is better to stay and fight and organise than to take oneself out of the game and then just be constantly looking through the window.
Yeah,
I get why many people have already thrown their cards in.
friends of mine,
there's been quite a bit of that happening already, and then of course this absolutely amazingly shocking statement comes out from Jenny Formby, the head of the NEC, chair of the NEC, saying anyone who leaks this bloody or shares the leaked anti-Semitism report will be at risk of legal action, despite the fact that there is actually legal protection for whistleblowers.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're not the original leaker, then it's already in the public domain.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, there's literally fuck all she could do about that. That is just empty threats.
Exactly. I mean,
pathetic, Jenny.
I have to confess, my Jenny Formby has gone down in my estimation when she made that statement. She was someone I was previously respecting and admiring, but I think she has really made a mistake with that public statement, because two things came into my head. First of all, the horse has bolted already. It's all out there and people are sharing it. So, and secondly, is the party really going to go around every single member and charge them with GDPR offences? Really? How many? It's probably in the hundreds of party members who've shared it. And lastly of all, that report shows you the level of sabotage, a cabal from within the party staff, a right-wing cabal, basically worked to wreck our electoral chances.
And this is the thing that that and any other potential truth coming out about past indiscretions. This is the major thing, the leaked anti-Semitism report, that will absolutely royally screw Starmer and any chance that he may or may not have had.
And speaking of which, I've got to finish off this point. My point about the GDPR is like, that report confirms what everyone's known for a long time, which is that the party staff in the H quarters were deliberately trying to wreck our electoral chances to make life as difficult for the leader as humanly possible. And the first thing that Jenny Formby thinks about is GDPR. That report comes out and the first thought that goes through your head is GDPR. Fuck GDPR. GDPR is fucking irrelevant to this report.
What is relevant to this report is the fact that these people who have sought to undermine the party's chances of coming to power, that is a direct breach of party rules, and these people should be immediately suspended pending further investigation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then again, there is no further investigation. It's already been fucking done. It's in an 850 odd page report that has been leaked to the public. So we already know the evidence is there, plain as day. Those people need to be fucked off immediately in order to preserve any form of credibility. That needs to happen immediately.
Yeah, and going back to the main topic of this episode, which is Keir Starmer, that week of this report represents a huge test for Starmer, and he's completely failed it. Completely.
Yes, he has. He's absolutely. He's been given a golden opportunity to really show all party members across the board that he is basically demonstrating leadership, and he's just gone. And the first thing he thinks about, much like Jenny Formby, is the fact that it was leaked, not its contents, not its conclusions, or rather its damning conclusions. No, it's, oh fuck, we've been found out.
Yeah, and he's well, he could show the party that he's serious about unifying the party, and he's just blown it completely. And
that is not a simple. That is not a difficult task there. There is only one course that is correct, and this would have been the same. This would have been the same in the Tory party. If someone breaks the rules, off you fuck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just a disaster. And
unless your name's Priti Patel, by the way, in that case, you get to fail upwards.
Yeah. That is astonishing in itself, but also Keir Starmer wants to reflect deeply. I mean, considering the fact that Ed Miliband, who we mentioned at the beginning of the programme, was considered by some people in the party to be too left-wing, despite the fact that Ed Miliband stood on a manifesto which was ultimately quite modest. There were some left-wing policies in it, but it was ultimately quite a modest manifesto. It hasn't dawned on Starmer that these people could come for him. Yes. And it's like, how politically inept do you have to be? It's like, it's just amazingly bad politics. I
was quite interested throughout all of this that David Miliband never sort of stuck his head above the parapet, despite the fact that he is kind of the poster boy of the centre of the Labour Party.
I'll have a little bet with you, Fred. I reckon that David Miliband will end up representing the Labour Party in a safe seat in the next 4 years.
Yeah, I'll have a fiver with you on that one.
I reckon it'll happen. Someone will make way, and David Miliband will be shoehorned in. And I can't remember what I was going to say about the report now.
Sorry.
What to say? Well, I mean, so there's quite a good evidence, because thinking, about the fact that Ed Miliband was considered too left-wing by some people in the party. Is that
Red Ed?
it was worth reflecting about what the staff did to our 2015 general election.
The rot was already there by then.
Yeah, and also if Starmer wants to earn some brownie points with the Red Wall, one thing he could do is he could say, right, we're no longer recruiting from student politics, because one of the ways which I think, one of the reasons I think party staff had such juvenile, nasty adolescent language in their,
because they were nasty adolescents.
but also a lot of them were recruited from student politics.
Yeah.
So organisations like Labour Students and the Progress Group are very, very right-wing institutions, and they're basically breeding grounds for right-wing Blairites. And there's like a glittering ladder opens up when you start university. So you become president of your union, you get a job as a researcher, and then ultimately you end up in party HQ. You haven't actually done anything outside of politics since you were a teenager. And I think, the long-term effects of recruiting in that way show themselves in the kind of nasty adolescent language that we've seen in the report. So if I was Starmer, aside from suspending everyone involved, removing the whip from McNichol, demanding that he returns his £1 million golden handshake, probably.
Absolutely.
I would say, listen, I'm going to implement a new rule. I'm going to put it forward in front of the requisite committees of the Labour Party so that it becomes Labour Party rules. You can no longer be acceptable. You can no longer be accepted into a working role within the party before you've done minimum 3 years in a job completely unrelated to politics.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just, I mean, I would implement a rule like that.
Yeah.
And he's just done nothing about it.
Mm. Yeah, it's amazing, this lack of action.
Yeah.
For someone who was supposed to, because for all the, the one argument that always got levelled at Jeremy Corbyn was lack of leadership, despite the fact that when you presented them with the numerous times that he displayed absolutely first-class leadership, and the number one thing there was the Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia when they got poisoned in where the hell was it now? Somewhere down south, anyway.
Salisbury, I think.
Salisbury, that's it. Yes, well remembered. He was the voice that was saying, actually, let's just calm the fuck down and establish the facts first, and then we can take action. Not, Russia did this and that's that, and we're gonna have strong words with them. Realistically, they did fuck all about it, because Russia, being Russia, just looks and goes, and what? So okay, you've frozen some assets, big fucking deal. Well, we've got assets coming out our ass. We're an oil-rich nation that produces our own fucking oil. We don't care.
Yeah.
We do not care. We make that many bloody rubles. We have to shovel them in, which is mostly because the ruble is worthless. But that's just the way it works.
Yeah.
But this one person who actually displays the correct response, the correct and sort of logical response of wanting to establish the facts first, is somehow completely devoid of any leadership qualities.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. And then Starmer gets this absolutely golden opportunity to show that he can just basically, I suppose the best way of describing this would be the aftermath of the American Civil War, where the Union, the victorious Union, the North, did not punish the South. Instead, they entered a phase of around, I think it was about 20 years, and it was called the Reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
Basically reconciling the differences and easing the transition. And that's what, and Sir Keir had this great opportunity to do that, and he absolutely fucking fluffed it.
Yeah, and I predict this will become a running theme of his leadership. Keir Starmer will be given open goal after open goal after open goal, and he will fluff it every time. Yeah. He's already been fluffing open goals. I mean, he's fluffing it right now with the fact that the government's absolutely disastrous policy with regards to PPE. So I was reading earlier today, was it Matt Hancock was told how much PPE would be required, and he didn't action it for a couple. Oh no, that was it. Sorry, I'm with you now. So it was not to do with PPE; it was to do with testing. So
yes.
So Matt Hancock has been testing a small amount of key workers, and it turns out the coronavirus tests that they were given were defective, but the government ploughed ahead with them anyway. Now that's a sackable offence. Now if Keir Starmer got his act together, he could absolutely have Matt Hancock's scalp, and he's just not doing it.
And what a gret first scout that would have been.
Yeah. I mean, he would be, actually, it's on the NHS, which has always been the great mobiliser of Labour support, certainly amongst the electorate. We've never had an offer which can appeal to the electorate like the NHS can. He should be sending everyone out, all hands to the pump, demanding Matt Hancock's resignation on an hourly basis. Every TV studio, every print media opportunity they get, call for Matt Hancock's resignation, asking for him to be sacked. And he's just not doing it. Instead, he's doing what is called constructive opposition, which is, I mean, if you call letting an incompetent Tory imbecile like Matt Hancock off the hook constructive opposition, then God help us, frankly.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, I agree. When I hear constructive opposition, I hear massaging your balls.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'll work with you. I'll make sure that the nasty people don't say those things about you. No, fuck off. The opposition's job is to hold the government to account. That is what the opposition is. That is what the opposition does.
Yeah, I mean, if I've got no sympathy with this idea that the Tories should go soft. We should go softly on the Tories because
it was them that fucked it up in the first place.
Yeah. I mean,
for the country, not obviously the fact that it's a worldwide crisis should not be discounted. But the fact remains that we had warning of this coming to our shore, and we sat on the fucking fence.
Yeah.
Because the Tories just could not deal with the thought that the market, the all-seeing eye that is the capitalist market, would potentially suffer a major hit, which of course it has.
Yeah.
Because why the fuck wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's a major pandemic that we need to take seriously, but instead we've got to protect the fucking money.
Yeah.
And then of course you've got Priti Patel, who has failed upwards into the role of Home Sec, who I'm very glad now that we have a counterfoil to all those absolutely cancerous attacks on Diane Abbott and her supposed lack of math skills, because bloody Priti Patel comes out and says we've got 12, 100,000 and 90, 60, 20 tests ordered, or whatever it was. What an absolute fucking idiot.
Yeah. Fred, do you mind if we just pause the conversation briefly? I just want to phone.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that point because.
Okay. Right. Do you mind sticking around for a little bit?
Sorry.
Do you mind sticking around for a bit and resuming this conversation?
Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah. No worries. Comfort break. All right. No worries. Cheers.
Bye.
Just for that, just a quick comfort break. So we were going on about how Keir Starmer has absolutely fucked up his first major task of the of his very new tenure.
Yeah.
So did you want to carry on, Alex? There.
Yeah. Well, I was just reflecting on the fact that he's letting the government get away with so many things and just missing so many open goals, whether it's on Matt Hancock's COVID virus testing, the fact lockdown wasn't implemented earlier, the fact that, the right support for the NHS wasn't there earlier, all of these things. But I was thinking, I've been waiting to talk about this because this is the kind of piece de resistance of Starmer's leadership so far. The territory he has chosen to go on the offensive is so bizarre. He has chosen to make the terrain on which to take the fight to the Tories is the lockdown exit strategy. And
yes.
It's been a disaster. I mean... Yeah,
it's been quite a dumpster fire so far. He's absolutely... He's really... quite frankly, he's taken on the least appropriate subject at this moment in time.
Yeah,
we're at the point now where numbers of daily cases and deaths are starting to generally plateau. There was a bit of a slump yesterday, a rather welcome slump of the number of people who've died yesterday, and then unfortunately it's then gone up again today. However, right now the last thing we should be wondering or musing about is when lockdown will end, because at the moment it's anyone's guess, and it's irrelevant, because we need to see those new cases coming steadily downwards, but decidedly downwards as well. Yeah. I was rather hoping we wouldn't do a fourth episode where we'd end up talking about COVID-19, but c'est la vie. Yeah. So yeah, we now have a leader who is taking on the least appropriate topic of the overarching crisis, and it's unfathomable. It really is. I cannot get my head around that at all.
I know. I mean, here's the thing about the exit strategy. At the moment, it seems to me that a lot of people are giving him the benefit of the doubt because he is such an eminent QC, and people have said to me, well, just go with it. He is a QC. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to build an argument. He's playing 10-dimensional chess. It's gonna come off. He's gonna reclaim the narrative, and I don't think people have thought this through, or maybe they're reading too much into it. And I passionately believe, and one of the reasons I'm so passionate about politics is I believe that once you strip away all the Westminster bullshit, politics is actually just very, very simple, and
that may be a little idealistic, but go on.
Yeah. Well, here's why I think the people who find lockdown hardest are people who are in accommodation with very, very little space. So I'm lucky, for example, because the flat that I'm in right now is large enough to accommodate 2 people. And it happens that for this evening, my flatmate's at work, so I've got the flat to myself. Now, I don't feel uncomfortable living here. But if you're in a tiny, cramped apartment or a tiny, cramped house with kids, elderly relatives to look after, or if you haven't managed to socially distance from your elderly relatives, this lockdown's going to be really hard going. And my impression is that people are worried about what will happen if you lift lockdown. And here's the problem: if the Tories relax the lockdown restrictions and the number of coronavirus deaths increase, as you would expect it would do,
yes,
because we're not actually beating back the tidal wave of coronavirus, we're just slowing it down. So if you restrict, as the government scientists have told us, this is not an offensive thing, not an offensive policy. This is a defensive policy. It's slowing down the wave of coronavirus. If we relax restrictions and lockdown now, that the number of deaths per day is just going to increase.
Yes, and this is one thing that I find myself having to give credit where it's due and come down on the side of the government. This is absolutely the worst possible time to consider taking our foot off the proverbial gas.
Absolutely. I mean, there is no one, I think, with their head screwed on believes that lockdown should be relaxed now.
No, it's not the time for that. I would hate to see a second wave of ever increasing numbers of daily deaths. No one wants to see that. If it has to be that we have to suffer a bit longer, I would rather suffer. I would rather suffer boredom than suffer death.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Well, that's that's exactly my position as well. But my feeling is when we're in the kind of the post-coronavirus phase and we're dealing with all the fallout, be it the social fallout in the large numbers of deaths, the deaths of blood relatives, or the economic fallout, people will blame the government and saying you lifted lockdown early. But they would also blame us, saying you pushed.
You agreed with it. Yeah, you pushed for this. This is kind of on you, really. Yeah.
We're going to get the blame for lifting lockdown as well, even though it's the fucking Tory government. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened to.
It's almost as if we're in a democracy of some description.
Yeah. Well, it's almost exactly what happened to Ed Miliband with austerity, isn't it?
Yes. He took partial blame for basically acquiescing to it and saying, yeah, we're going to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and so it's just it's not the right thing to pursue, and there are other things to pursue at the moment.
Yeah, pursuing and the ones that are at the forefront of this now are PPE for frontline NHS workers and testing for same as well, and as well as obviously the wider population as far as testing goes. And the one thing that I hate to see at the moment, and I'm seeing it, and I'm sure lots of people are seeing it in their own areas, is people who probably, and I say this with a degree of sort of certainty, that probably are not suffering with any symptoms, but go out wearing a mask, a face mask, surgical face mask. That is a face mask that could have gone to a nurse.
Yeah, exactly.
Or another frontline worker. A lot of people, and whilst, of course, absolutely, of course, the NHS deserves every single ounce of praise that we can heap on it at the moment. There's other branches of civil service and government roles that are also essential, such as the prison service, who they still have to go into work because and also in the probation service as well. They're still having to protect the public, not from the virus necessarily, but they're having to protect them from dangerous people, or potentially dangerous people, certainly. And that's a side that's so far I have not seen anyone sort of mention, because if we were to just simply say, well, we don't want to pack all these people into densely overcrowded prisons because they're at risk of rapidly spreading the virus. Who thinks, hands up, who thinks it's a good idea to just simply let them go? No, of course not.
No. I mean, the prison, the coronavirus does present a real challenge for the prison services, and just to anyone.
Yes.
And I mean, I think the lesson is this: if you want public services to deal with crises like this, you have to properly fund them.
Yes.
And, that's what the Tory party are not doing. And on that level, on that, I just want to mention this because it's just come back to me. In 2000, and this is another good example in which Starmer is missing open goals.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, the NHS had a pandemic scenario. So it had what's it called? What's the right word for it? They tested to see how the service would function in a pandemic scenario. It was in 2016. It was called. I'm trying to find the actual name of the name of the operation that the NHS gave it, but it was
it was basically a stress test, wasn't it?
Yeah, a stress test to see how the NHS would hold up in the event of a pandemic. It was then found out the NHS was woefully ill prepared for a pandemic scenario, and the government did nothing. But it's also worth pointing out. A mutual colleague of ours said something that is certainly plausible. I can't remember if he knew this as to be the case or not, as fact, but he said to me that all these hospitals will have had hordes and hordes of PPE, but then you'd have probably got penny pinchers coming along and saying, well, hang on, if we just use all this stockpile PPE, then we save money by not reordering for a few months. Yeah.
And Yeah, of course, that might be just a little sort of tinfoil hat kind of conspiracy, which there's been plenty of those floating about recently.
Yeah.
But
About
that does sound plausible.
So if
That sounds, considering that the NHS these days, and like pretty much all government departments, are pretty much at the mercy of bean counters and trouser polishers.
Mhm.
That to me sounds absolutely plausible.
Yeah, I can definitely believe it, because a lot of public services were reduced to finding ways of cutting costs
Yeah.
as a result of austerity, you know. So these things will happen. But the fact that, you know, there was clearly an alarm bell sounded to the government on this matter, and you know, the government are now dealing with a situation which the NHS was underprepared for, which they knew it was underprepared for, and did nothing about it. Now, Starmer should be hammering the government on that, but it's just like, I've just not heard it anywhere on the mainstream media.
But if you look at Jeremy Corbyn's statements, in the meantime, he has been, asking these questions and attacking the government for not, for these failings, and which is fulfilling the exact promise that his outgoing sort of statement saying that I will not stop in my fight for what I believe is correct. That's paraphrasing, of course, but that was the gist of it. And he's absolutely living up to that. But I'm sure that will still somehow makes him a terrible person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once again, just vindicated by his own actions.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely vindicated. I mean,
absolutely, and it just goes to prove that clearly the pub, we didn't fucking deserve him as PM. You get what you pay for, and we paid for an absolute fucking clown, and and there it is.
Yeah, I mean, there it is. I mean, if, as someone said on Twitter, if you elect a clown, expect a circus.
Yeah, and fuck me, did we get one?
Yeah, I mean,
literally, I think if instead of the famous News at 10 bongs on ITV, it should literally be.
Boris Johnson can come out to his press conferences to the theme tune of Curb Your Enthusiasm or something like.
Or Yakety Sax from Benny Hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but this is the problem. That just shows you how fucking awful that election was. Because
I mean, fair enough. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn could quite well come out to the theme tune of Steptoe and Son. Someone's going to say it.
But this is the problem when you elect tele-celebrities.
Yes.
This is the problem when you elect a pop star, not a politician.
Yeah, and the amount of times that Boris Johnson, in his sort of in the early 2000s, the amount of times he appeared on shows like the absolutely fantastic "Have I Got News for You?"
Yeah,
and he was funny as fuck on that.
Yeah,
because that's who he is. He's an entertainer at heart.
Yeah,
but then but for example, you would not want to give the keys to number 10 to Michael McIntyre, would you?
No, I mean...
Oh, yeah, he can make people laugh, but does that necessarily make him qualified to do the job? Not really.
No, I mean, this is the problem. If you let... You can't be a comedian and a successful politician. And you
By the way, I must just interject there. I do not endorse Michael McIntyre as a comedian.
I know you don't. I know.
Sorry, yeah. I just want to point that out there. That was just the first comedian's name that popped into my head.
Yeah, you can't be a comedian and a successful politician, and you certainly can't be a comedian and a governor of a country. And because he can't... Boris Johnson was great on Have I Got News for You?
Yeah, he was. I looked forward to when they next had him on, because he would always come out with something fucking brilliant.
Yeah,
and it kind of endeared him to you. You need to shut your WhatsApp up, dude.
Yeah, sorry.
It's fine. It's either that.
I edit these out in the.
It's either that, or are you checking your glasses to check that they're crystal? One of us has to be the champagne socialist.
I know, but we can do these episodes several times over a couple of nights if you want, and then stitch them into one gigantic.
I suppose we might have to, by the look of the ever-developing conversation. I would like to. I would like to touch on other subjects other than sort of perennial subjects rather than current affairs all the time. But yeah, anyway.
What kind of subjects would you like to touch upon?
Okay. Well, things like we should do a dedicated Brexit one, even though that is kind of current affairs. But I think we should do some more societal ones, like having a bit of a breakdown of the police, for example.
Mm.
I wouldn't, and I'm personally a supporter of British police, but it doesn't mean that they haven't had their problems.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we've segued again. We're supposed to be talking about Ed Miliband 2.0.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think we're probably now at the moment coming to the natural end where I think we shall have to save up some extra material in the current affairs, what comes out in the next couple of weeks or so. And like we did with our Jeremy Corbyn episode, in episode 1, we decided that, mostly because of our drunken stupor, we really had only done about half of what we actually wanted to talk about.
Yeah, well, there's just so much to talk about Starmer. It's like we haven't even, all we've been talking about is basically his complete. He's got this characteristic, and it's this incredibly risk adverse character.
Yeah, kind of like Teflon.
He's incredibly risk adverse. Like, he won't stick his neck out at all. And I think this is going to be
that already, hasn't he? He won't stick his neck out and say, you know what, some of our staff were arseholes.
Yeah, he won't. Yeah. And I think this is going to be his undoing, because it's so obvious just watching him. He's only been in the job a few weeks, months, and he's so timid. And I think I think working class people at this moment in time, with all that's gone on the last 20 years, with all that's going on in the world, they don't have time for a Labour leader to play 10-dimensional chess. They don't have time for that, and I think this will be his undoing. But we certainly want to come back and talk more. We can talk about
absolutely. I think the main thing that I would definitely want to touch on, especially if I'm acting like, and I'm saying this like we actually have fans, but if somebody out there, or if we find it ourselves, can find out the definitive truth to the Jimmy Savile question, the alleged Jimmy Savile question that has hung over Keir Starmer so far, that's something that I would really like to dive into, and get in the weeds of, and really find out what went on. And if it wasn't him, then who the fuck was it?
Yeah.
As I said earlier on, because this is something that really needs to be pinned down.
Exactly. Yeah. He will. That's going to come back to haunt him. I predict that.
It will do. I mean, if people can throw mud at Jeremy Corbyn just for having a photograph taken of him with Jerry Adams. Then, despite the fact that, you can just Google Boris Johnson and Martin McGuinness, or, Maggie Thatcher and Augusto Pinochet, it's just like, for everything you can throw at Jeremy, we can throw at least 10 times more back at you.
Yeah, I love the fact that people gave Corbyn stick for meeting Hamas. Like, Tony Blair met Hamas 4 times.
Yeah, Gordon Brown met with Gaddafi. I think we actually mentioned this in the in episode 1 or 2 about we are more than capable and more than willing to cozy up to people, regardless of the fact that they might actually be massive shithouses, but because it's massively financially beneficial to us. And we've proved that in the past, because we basically follow America's lead. America, America have a great track record, and I say great in inverted commas, of propping up god-awful regimes, and even installing god-awful regimes such as Noriega and Saddam and Ayatollah Khomeini. They are absolutely fantastic at installing a regime and then it coming back to bite them in the arse, and then they have to go and sort it out again. This is why America was probably a lot better off in the interwar years with their isolationist policies. They were still a great financial powerhouse and great industrial powerhouse, but they didn't. They just kept themselves to themselves. And now look at it. They've got their fingers in that many pies. They might as well be a gynecologist.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean,
I'm quite proud of that joke.
There's so much to talk about, Stan. We haven't even talked about the shadow cabinet yet.
The shadow cabinet, yes. Basically, let's go with the shadow cabinet. So it's basically out with the lefties and in with the righties, or the centrists, whatever you want to term it.
Right.
And we've got maybe three of the sort of Jeremy Corbyn sort of contingent left as a kind of sop, rather than having a 50-50 parity, in order to make sure that we're not just in an echo chamber, which is probably which you can't really accuse Jeremy Corbyn of creating an echo chamber, because he kept twats like Tom Watson around.
Yeah, I mean, you look back at the shadow. You look back at Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet, and you see so much time was wasted promoting people who should never have been in the shadow cabinet in the first place, like Hilary Benn. But you look at this shadow cabinet, and it really is a rogues gallery. I mean,
yes,
the shadow foreign secretary. I mean, Rachel Reeves, shadow chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. That's the woman who said that the Labour Party is not the party of the unemployed. David Lammy, kind of the.
You know how much I love David Lammy. David Lammy, race beta extraordinaire.
Well, do you know that David Lammy is like one of the. He's a really, really strong supporter of Labour Friends of Israel, who defend apartheid in the Middle East. It's like, and you got who else you got? Well, you got there's a lot of non-entities here, like Luke Pollard, Shadow Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. You know how important the green issues are at this moment in time. Can you remember anything Luke Pollard's ever done? I
don't even know who it is, but then again, that's not really saying much. I've said in the past, I am not as well read as yourself on various issues.
Pangam Debonair, completely awful. Ian Murray, Shadow Scotland Secretary. There's a place for Ian Murray in the cabinet and not Richard Bergen. Beat him in the deputy leader roles.
And then of course was it Annalise Dodds, Chancellor of the Shadow Chancellor? Again, never heard of her. Angela Rayner. I don't know about Angela Rayner. I don't know a lot about her, but something about me is slightly suspicious.
Yeah. Charlie Falconer, Shadow Attorney General. Right. So he is Tony Blair's former flatmate.
Oh God.
Yeah, and he's like one of the biggest supporters of the Iraq War. Keir Starmer puts him in as a shadow, the most important solicitor in the entire country. Valerie Vaz, who I think is married to or related to, I think I remember, but I think she may be involved with Keith Vaz,
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's not a particularly common, as far as I'm aware, surname. Keith Vaz, of course, very controversial figure within the Labour Party. The thing that made me laugh and also made me quite angry, because I seen, from what I saw, which admittedly wasn't a lot, but Jonathan Ashworth. Now, from what I initially saw with him, he seemed okay, like not great, not terrible, but sort of all right. Yeah, I could deal with that. And then, of course, it turns out that he is sort of got something to do with this, with his anti-Semitism report and the sort of toxic atmosphere inside of the Labour Party. And then when this all comes out, he has the audacity to kind of say, "Yeah, it was just bounce, mate. Yeah, it's just banter," or
Look who else is in
that's
here.
not good enough. It's just
Greeting is in the shadow cabinet. This is the man who defended McDonald's during the Muck strike. Stephen Kinnock,
yeah,
So,
big to the family.
Yeah. Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I mean, there is a politician who is really, really out for his depth. I mean, forget me on. Stephen Kinnock is in a different class of his own, but he's in the shadow cabinet. And then we have the piece de resistance, the crowning turd in the water pipe of this shadow.
Now that is a Blackadder reference. Go on. Well done.
It's Jess Phillips.
Oh, our favourite vile feminist. Yeah.
Human being rather than feminist. A feminist is all right, but Jess Phillips is. My
disagree with that.
A very, very privileged conception of feminism. It's
So she is. I'm looking at the page right now on the Labour website. Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence and Safeguarding. Literally, some would argue that that makes her the best person to be in that role. I would argue the opposite, because I guarantee that she pays no attention to men's issues, which we know because she laughs at them. Just fucking Google it, or rather YouTube it. She fucking laughs when men's issues are brought up. And domestic violence is actually more prevalent against males than you would think, because of course we as men are taught that A, you don't show your emotions, and B, you don't hit women. Now, the latter, of course, I absolutely agree with. You shouldn't, but then again, you shouldn't hit anybody, because that is what an arsehole does. You don't hit people, full stop. Yeah. However, if some crazy fucker's coming at me, regardless of their genitalia, they're going to get put down.
Yes.
I'm not going to apologise for that. If some fucker's threatening, like, my children or even me with a knife or a broken bottle or something, bitch is going to hit the floor.
Yeah. Just going to say at this point that...
not that I advocate violence.
Yeah. Fred, we're not advocating violence against anyone. And I think I'm kind of like more relaxed about these kind of issues than you are, Fred. But my issue with Jess Phillips is this: she's just a shit politician. I mean,
that
you talked about Shadow Minister for Safeguarding. Didn't she joke about stabbing Jeremy Corbyn in the front?
Yes, you mentioned this in I think it was episode 1, and it was was it a misquote of Oscar Wilde?
Yeah, it was a misquote. So the original optimism is from Oscar Wilde, who said that a true friend will stab you in the front. Mm-hmm. So it's not even her.
Oh, so she thinks she's a true friend of Jeremy Corbyn? Then have we got her wrong all this time?
No, I mean,
oh damn!
I mean, she's like, no, but her deputy leadership, was it a leadership? No, it was a leadership election, was utterly disastrous.
Yeah, it was a damp squib. It was absolutely hilarious.
humiliating thing.
And it was so slick, wasn't it? The campaign video was so slick.
I know.
And yet,
We've
you know,
talked about this before. It's like that video was so slick and well produced. It makes you think, who's funding this? You know,
which again kind of brings us back a little bit to Starmer. Who funded him? And if you remember, I tagged you in a post from Kerry Mendoza of the Canary, who she stated that imminently they're going to publish a story as to where the money came from for Keir Starmer's campaign. You remember that?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that.
So am I. I'm a massive fan of the Canary.
Yeah.
I would love to. I'd absolutely love to do a piece with them sometime. I don't know why the hell they would, but if I ever got that opportunity, I would jump at it.
Yeah, I mean, and also I've got to mention this. Kate Green is the shadow Minister for Child Poverty, I think. Now, Kate Green is an utter disaster. But again, there's something indicative about Kate Green because she's a dreadful MP, and you know. But I'm looking at her CV right now. So she was chief executive of the Child Poverty Action Group, and before that, director of the National Council for One-Parent Families, which now I gather is termed Gingerbread. So she was an ambassador for the Albert Kennedy Trust, a charity which supports LGBT homeless young people in crisis. Now, they're quite worthy things to do, but I think I'm reflecting on this, and the problem with the Labour Party we've got is too often our MPs come from the middle class professions, and I do think certainly when it comes to selecting our candidates, we are over dependent on the charity sector, and I think often when MPs, Labour MPs, come from the charity sector, they don't come from like the bottom of the charity sector, they come from management roles. And I think this is a problem because it's worth remembering that there is no real third sector in Britain. Britain only has two sectors, the public sector and the private sector, and that's it. And charities are private organisations. They're very worthy ones, but their business model is of a private organisation.
Yes.
So people like Kate Green, who've taken management roles in these kind of charities before, often they've got more in common with management in the private sector they do with people who stack shelves for a living, or delivery riders, or people in sport who work in Sports Direct factories or Amazon warehouses. You know, so another really big problem because their values are not a million miles away from their Tory opponents. So
yeah, I mean that's the thing. A lot of but then again, this is kind of endemic with Westminster politicians in general, and it was pointed out to me recently that you know, someone who I actually thought is quite a tour de force when in Parliament, and that is the SNP representative for Paisley and Renfrewshire, Mary Black. She comes across, she presents this image of you know, proper tough working class Glasgow, but it turns out her family are barristers. You know, both her parents are barristers. If that's tough working class Glasgow, I mean, maybe in Paisley it is.
Yeah.
But you know, that doesn't exactly resonate with what everyone perceives to be Glasgow, which is probably some kind of amalgamation of like a Ramsay Nesbitt character. You know, the sort of proper hard drinking, hard fighting, hard farting Scot, you know.
I know. I mean, well, yeah. I mean, do you know Jess Phillips's parents? Her mother was like vice chair of the Midlands NHS Federation or something.
Wow.
And apparently that whole family have a business, you know, which the whole family are employed in. So, you know, she's just a complete charlatan, and you know, but to do with Starmer, this shadow cabinet, I think, proves he's not truly interested in uniting the party at all. Look at it, there's only really 2 people in the shadow cabinet who could be said to be true Corbynites. The rest are just disastrous. And
then again, I mean, doesn't mean that to say that anyone who is automatic, is a Corbynite is automatically a good person. Because everyone has their failings. But having said that, can you think? I mean, it's just going to sound biased as fuck, but can you think of anything bad about Rebecca Long Bailey?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of a couple of things actually.
Well, for the sake of balance, go for it. Just quickly.
So her campaign, I think, was a disaster.
Yeah.
It got off onto the wrong foot. It started too late, and you could tell that there was, in many ways, this was a harbinger of things to come. So she started her campaign, and she did 2 things, I think, to a mistake. She tried to use this slightly new Labour type of language, which into a couple of her articles and a couple of her speeches, a couple of her promotion videos. So she talked about progressive patriotism. Then half her team didn't like that, so they removed it. And this actually was the first really, really big alarm bell. She talked about this thing called aspirational socialism, which, if you'll remember, is actually the slogan from Andy Burnham's failed 2010 leadership bid.
Yeah, vaguely I do remember this. Yeah,
so
aspirational. I mean, what does that even mean?
Yeah, Andy Burnham came 4th in 2010, and Rebecca Long Bailey, for some reason, thought that was a good idea to plagiarise, and that was a real winner. And also, it didn't help her. She was talking about aspirational socialism, and she referenced in, I think it was an article or a speech, but she referenced an apocryphal story that Tony Blair once told Labour Party conference. It involves an Alfa Romeo or a Ford Sierra.
Oh, no, I remember this. Yes, did this come out in episode 1, the Ford Sierra.
Okay, so Blair once told Labour Party conference this story. He was door knocking in his constituency of Sedgefield, and apparently he got talking to. He recalled a conversation he had with a gentleman who owned a Ford Sierra.
I thought it was actually. Ford Mondeo rings a bell. I remember something about Ford Mondeo Man.
Yeah, but this is a different thing. He actually Ford Sierra. So the man was it's claimed the man was a self-employed electrician who his dad voted Labour. He used to vote Labour, but now he's owned his own house. He's set up his own business, so he became a Tory. And this apparently crystallised in Blair's mind the kind of person the Labour Party would have to win back if it wants to get into government again. Now, here's my thesis about this story. I put it to you, Fred, that this Ford Sierra story is a fantasy. It's a complete fiction. That conversation never happened. Blair never met a voter like that at all, and it's a product of Blair's fevered imagination.
Well, I suppose the only person to ask is the alleged Ford Sierra Man.
Yeah, but there is Ford Sierra Man. But because everyone knows this about Blair, that he is a fantasist and he makes things up. But
well, he's proved that recently, hasn't he? Because he's been active in the public sphere again by saying very controversial things, such as, and I paraphrase, but I would not want to see a Labour government that was left wing, which again, massive breach of party rules.
Yeah, and I mean, he breaks the rules all the time, but
but no one seems to fucking, especially on international law. But yeah, he just doesn't seem to give a fuck.
But Rebecca Long Bailey, we told this Ford Sierra story, and it's like, what are you doing? And the second thing is, I think the advice John Landsman gave her on anti-Semitism was just a disaster, and the Jewish Labour movement hustings, she was a complete disaster at. And the problem, I think, with Rebecca Long Bailey is, aside from the fact that her campaign was confused and it was apologetic at times, she she didn't come out. I mean, one of the great things about Richard Bergen and Ian Lavery and John Trickett is they said, yes, these are our politics. We've got nothing to be ashamed about them. Come on, I'll have a fight with everyone. Rebecca Long-Bailey seems to be very apologetic. She said, oh yeah, I apologise about the last 4 years. I apologise about the election. It's like, just what's attractive? It's like, because if you don't have convictions...
No, if all you're doing is sort of... if all you're doing is apologising, apologising now, then that just means all you're going to do is end up doing the same thing later. I'm sorry we didn't do enough. I'm sorry that. Come on, you need to take a stand and say either one way or the other. Yeah, okay, we fucked up. My bad.
Yeah.
And we'll change, or you say, yeah, or what's actually the truth, I should say. Yeah, that was all bollocks. And, oh, look, here's this report that proves that it was bollocks.
Yeah.
That is the crux of all that, is never mind worrying about what people... what people think about things that were out of your control,
Exactly. And I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
Rebecca Long-Bailey just doesn't connect.
Yeah, she seems emotionally quite distant when she talks.
Emotionally distant is the right word. She has this emotional distance, which I don't think you can really have as a leader anymore. I mean, if she had become Labour leader, she would kind of be our Theresa May, and all the kind of shit that was poured on Theresa May for being
a robot.
A robot would have happened to Rebecca Long-Bailey. And I think actually the person who I think does have some blame for this is not her necessarily, because I think she's very bright. I think she's really clever, and I think she's got a bright future, and all of that. But I think she was over promoted by John McDonnell. I mean, I think she was, and I think she was the constant. She's actually closer in politics to John McDonnell than she is to Jeremy Corbyn, and I think
John McDonnell is a bit harder left than Jeremy, isn't he?
Well, he's saying that, but John McDonnell can be a bit all over the place sometimes. But
wasn't he quoted as saying something about some kind of vague aspiration of conducting violence against Tories?
Well, yeah,
I can't remember the exact quote, but that something in the back of my mind seems to remember that being brought up a few times.
Yeah, but anyway,
not a great start.
For whatever reason, she didn't connect, and I think it's quite obvious now is that Ian Lavery should have been the left candidate.
Yeah, I think there's a great, a huge missed opportunity with Ian Lavery.
Yeah,
and I hope he sees very well what has been going on so far, and has quietly resolved to not pass up an opportunity again.
Yeah, I mean,
should it come up?
If by some miracle we survive, he would be my choice. I don't give a fuck about his record or his past. He's got the two qualities I like, which are policies and the kind of courage and a good on platform to carry them through.
Policies and bollocks. That's what it boils down to. I.e., having fortitude, intestinal fortitude to stand up and say, no, you're wrong. Yeah,
and to sack people.
Yeah. That is, one of Jeremy's great failings is, not saying, right, you've taken a set against me in public that that is unacceptable. You're either with me or against me. Off you fuck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas we had, if you remember, we had this great sort of mass exodus from the shadow cabinet. Rachel Maskell of York Central was one of them, and it was kind of like it was this kind of like he said something I disagree with, so I'm going to run away.
Yeah.
That's just cowardly.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just saying to him, dude, the fuck, on whatever issue it was, and have it out in public, have the debate.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, rather than all these people jumping, it should have been a case of, no, you're not jumping over the side. I'm forcing you to walk the plank.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's the one great failing, I think. But as we said before, the guy was just too fucking nice.
Yeah, he was.
Too nice of a person. Unfortunately, politics is a lot of politics is being about a hard-nosed, cutthroat bastard.
I know, and
It's awful. It's a sad reality, but it is a reality.
Certainly, I've been on a long and difficult journey over the last 5 years to that realization, because 2015 we had a whole 2 or 3 generations of very presidential politics. Leaders like Thatcher and Blair, they thought of themselves as American presidents rather than prime ministers. And what was about Jeremy Corbyn is he was like a tribune of the people, and he was a nice, kindly, decent fellow who was interested in talking about the issues of the day and not, swanning around in a giant motorcade or leaving the House of Commons and becoming a consultant for the companies they privatised, like Thatcher's cabinet ministers used to do, and new Labour ministers continued. But the nicer kind, I think people like me have just come back down to earth now about nicer kind of politics, because you can talk about nicer kind of politics, but if everyone around you is a complete bastard, what are you going to do? And Jeremy Corbyn was such a pacifist. He would not react, even when people were screaming utter hysterical nonsense in his face. He still wouldn't react. And I think there's no doubt that the hysteria wouldn't have become so overwhelming and so massive. And
I mean, one easy thing he could have done was to just simply clarify about, when he met with members of the IRA and Sinn Féin, when they were sort of at the time certainly more the IRA than Sinn Féin, but still pariahs very much in the public eye back in mainland UK. If he'd have just said, look, I went over there, I met them because I wanted to bring them to the negotiation table to end the fucking madness.
Yeah,
and that would have, and then that would have been it.
Yeah, well, that was.
But instead, it persisted and persisted because there was actually no definitive answer.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously it was bollocks. About him being some sort of some sort of terrorist Irish Czech spy, fucking whatever.
Yeah,
but. All I needed to do was just to say, no, that's not the case.
Have you seen that footage of Tony Benn saying exactly that in the House of Commons?
Yeah.
He's talking about Sinn Féin, and he says, I'm in favour of pursuing all avenues to stop the killing.
Yeah.
You have to say perfect answer.
Yeah, it is.
I mean,
and it's the only sensible answer.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but, that is the tragedy of Jeremy Corbyn. Only he'd been a hard bastard.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I am excited about Ian Lavery is he's got all Jeremy Corbyn's politics, but he's a hard bastard.
Yeah, which is why his deputy should have been Dennis Skinner. To imagine. Maybe you should. Maybe Dennis should have actually launched a coup against Tom Watson. That would have been good actually. Jeremy Dennis Skinner ticket. Unfortunately, wasn't to be. And Dennis probably wouldn't have done it anyway. Well, I don't know. He loves a good political scrap.
Yeah, he does.
Oh my God! There's a reason why they call him the Beast, and he absolutely earns that.
Yeah.
In spades. Anyway, so I think it looks like we've probably come to the natural conclusion of the overarching subject of Keir Starmer. I'm sure there will be an episode 2 as and when current things develop.
I think at some point he'll have his Brighton Beach moment, won't he?
Hopefully, we'll have some nice things to report about him. Hopefully, we'll be able to say, do you know what? He did X and he was absolutely cock on the money. But, so far, it's not a promising start. It really is not.
No.
If he wants to get the party back together, he needs to make some some decisions that will go against the grain of his financiers and
all our
cronies.
To all our 3 listeners, forget everything you hear from
2 of them being us.
To all the 2 people listening, the 2 sad, lonely, isolated people listening, forget everything you hear on the mainstream media, and just forget all the faint praise that's being poured on Starmer by the Tory party and by the media. Step outside of the Westminster bubble, and from the outside, it's not going at all well. He's missing open goals, fluffing his lines, and just genuinely not connecting with the public. I mean, whatever the public may say about wanting, and the public have probably told focus groups they want constructive opposition, but then again, they also want NHS workers to be provided with PPE. So, maybe the picture isn't as clear as what one answer to one question in a focus group.
Well, I mean, the thing is with the great British public, they're very much they're very difficult to please because they don't want immigration, but then again, who the fuck's gonna pick the fucking asparagus? Yeah, exactly. Someone.
They want a government who's gonna do well in a massive public health crisis like this, but they elect a fucking clown.
Well, of course, at the time, and no one really thought that COVID-19 was going to be a thing, really. I still remember joking about it. We all did. We all thought, oh, everyone's going mental, just like they did over all the other sort of diseases that didn't really come to a great deal.
No.
And now it's hit people. And now the chickens have come home to roost. Bok, bok. Yeah. That's all you can say.
Yeah. Put it down. I mean, we should probably wrap up now, but
yes, yeah.
Let's be assured, in the real world, it's not going well for Starmer, and
or the country, really.
Well, yeah, for democracy as a whole, but
it's definitely not going well for Starmer. You need to look past the propaganda machine. You need to see him for what he really is.
Yeah.
And he's just another establishment politician. He does not represent your ideals. He is, he is basically another elitist that will take you for a fucking ride.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically another Sadiq Khan. Maybe we should do an episode on Sadiq Khan.
Sadiq, yeah. And Chuka Umunna would be a good one to cover.
Oh, yes. The glorious political career of Chuka Umunna.
Yep. More moves than Nicholas Anelka. Absolutely incredible. Anyway, right. So we'll wrap it up at that then.
Yeah.
This is going to be a long episode anyway, a bit like episode 1 was. So I shall get that all stitched together. And we'll hopefully see you in the not too distant future. And for episode 7, and thank you to both of you who are listening, and please like and subscribe for more of 2 Blokes Talking Bollocks.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Take care. Keep safe out there, man.
Ta-ra.
All of you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.